This is Carolina This Week. Carolina This Week with Tim McGinnis.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us for Carolina This Week. Summer's over. It's getting cooler. That means November's right around the corner, and so is the general election, where we'll be not only picking who we want to be our next president, but also who the 7th Congressional District wants it to be its first congressperson. And joining me this morning is one of the two people vying for that seat, Gloria Bromell Tinubu. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Good morning, Tim. Thank you for having me.
Am I saying Tinubu right now after all these times?
Tinubu.
Tinubu.
Oh. Good. Good job.
Thanks for being with me this morning.
My pleasure.
I want to get right down to issues. Everybody is saying that jobs is the big issue. I think your opponent would agree that jobs is the main issue. And by the way, we will have Tom Rice on this program next Sunday morning.
Okay.
How do you bring jobs to an area that really needs them?
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be with you. One of the ways that we create jobs is to make sure that we have a middle class and a working class that's making the kinds of salary and wages that will benefit businesses, because they're having a purchasing power that will enable businesses to grow and to prosper. So the piece that we sometimes lose sight of is the fact that businesses are going to do and prosper, as well as the middle class primarily prospers. So what we've seen, though, over the last 30 years, since about 1980, is a steady decline in the average wages of the middle class worker. And what this has done is made it very difficult for businesses to generate the kind of revenues they need, to hire additional workers. So we've had this sort of spillover and circular impact. You know, there are those who talk about, you know, the very rich being the job creators. Really, the job creators are the folks in the middle who spend a large proportion of their money on basic goods and services which are provided by businesses. So in order to have a thriving economic sector, we have to make sure that we have people fully employed, and that's why I'm pushing for the country to focus on full employment as its #1 economic agenda. And with that, we also want to make sure that those dollars circulate within our community, within the local economy, creating jobs, creating what we call a multiplier effect. And because a lot of the monies that people are spending are going outside, they're creating jobs in other places for other people. And so we create jobs by making sure that people get paid wages that they can take care of themselves and their families, purchasing the goods and services, the housing, the food, and all of that they need, and then make sure that once they spend those monies with local businesses, those dollars are circulated back into the community, creating more jobs for more people.
So bolster the middle class, bolster the economy.
And bolster local businesses, because they're the ones who keep most of those dollars within the local community, compared to big boxes where they're paying for cheap labor outside of the country, where those dollars that are generated in terms of revenues go to some headquarters outside of the local market.
Now, your opponents would say, not only Mr. Rice, but I think the Republican Party in general would say, what you need to do is get regulation out of the way for small business owners and for businesses, so they can actually create a business that can grow and employ people.
Well, that's what they would say, but what we see in terms of the actual data and the actual facts is that we've got a lot of small businesses. Creating businesses, going into business is not the problem. The problem is that many of our small businesses don't have access to capital and to credit that will enable them to invest in productive assets that would then enable them to hire more workers. So much of what we see is the credit being made available to the large, big corporate entities that actually don't need it, because they're hoarding the profits that they've generated themselves. And the statistics show that over these past 30 years, 40 years again, we've seen record profits. And those record profits are going to primarily your large major corporations that benefit from all the tax breaks, benefit from all the deregulation, when the small and medium-sized family business aren't benefiting at all. In fact, these large businesses are using their market power and their market share to drive small and medium-sized businesses out of business. So if we must focus on the small and medium-sized and family-owned businesses, and to the extent that we can put in place regulation that will free up more capital for them, that will be a good thing. The extent that we can get rid of the red tape so that they could be able to be competitive and not be engaged in so much, paperwork, that's great. But the problem is not that we are passing laws that hurt the small businesses, that hurt the big businesses. We're actually passing those things that may hurt small businesses, and we can free them by giving them the resources they need, the access to capital, and the access to markets.
What would you do? Name us something specific that you would do for a small business owner.
Well, one of the first things I would do is right now, we've got billions of dollars that are being held onto by commercial banks. Those very banks that were bailed out with tax dollars. These businesses, the small and medium-sized businesses who are doing well, who are hiring local people, could potentially expand if they had access to capital to invest in more machinery and hire additional workers. They've got the markets. They may even have contracts, because many of them are suppliers to government, to other businesses as well. But they don't have access to capital to be able to expand. I would make sure that we create an opportunity for them to have that access right away. One of the things I talked with a gentleman yesterday who talked about the fact that even with the financial industry, a lot of the challenges that small businesses are facing have to do with the financial industry and their extraction of so much from society just to serve that middleman role of lending somebody else's money, and they're getting these exorbitant prices and fees as a result of that. One gentleman was saying that every time he swipes a credit card or a debit card or even a card for someone who's on food stamps, he has to pay 3 or 3.5% out of his own pocket to be able to use that service. So now, and that money is not going to, the government, or it's going to an industry that is really extracting a lot of costs but not creating a lot of value. So I would do something about deregulating that so that those costs can be gotten rid of or eliminated. I think those kinds of things hurt small businesses more. The financial aspect of what we do hurt them more than anything else.
I want to talk about unions, because that's something that I think surprises a lot of people, that you're running pro-union in a state that is not pro-union, that would say, many people would say, look at what happened in North Charleston, look at what Boeing built down there and how many people that's employing. And Boeing probably wouldn't be here if it weren't for the fact that this is not a pro-union state.
Well, I think Boeing wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the public subsidy that they received in terms of tax incentives and free land and free this and free that for several years into the future. What I am and who I am is I'm pro working families. I'm pro people who have to work for a living. And that is just about 95% of us who have to work for a living. And I know the history of the labor movement. I know that if it hadn't been for the labor movement, we wouldn't have an 8-hour workday. We wouldn't have a 40-hour work week. We wouldn't have leave, sick leave and vacation leave and safety standards in our workplaces. Because at the end of the day, and Adam Smith talked about this, is that capitalism is a great economic system. But it's not designed to create jobs and look out for the worker. It's designed to maximize profits. And a lot of time, that's at the expense of the worker. Because we've seen the numbers on the financial statements where, oh, businesses are doing great and Wall Street is doing great. They're laying off You know, thousands of workers, but profits are up. And the reason for that is that's how workers are really paid. You know, a firm hires labor. It uses its capital. It uses raw materials, produce a product, a good or service. And usually those people who own the business also, you know, get paid for their labor. They get paid rent for the land that they're using. They get paid interest for their capital. And the difference between the cost and, you know, of those services and what they receive for their product is that profit margin. And typically, business people have historically shared those productivity gains that are primarily due to labor with labor. But over the past, since 1980, we've seen a steady decline in average wages, where workers are getting less and less of what they help to create, and more of the profits are going to the people who own, and there are very few people, and that's why we see this great disparity that we see in our economy. And one of the venture capitalists, I think his name is Nick Hanauer, said, you know, I don't create jobs, I make money. And at the end of the day, that's what's the goal of the system is to do, is to use capital, to create more capital, to create more capital. And a lot of times that's at the expense of the worker. And in fact, Adam Smith said in his Wealth of Nations that for one very rich person who has property, by necessity, there are going to be at least 500 poor. The system is designed that way. But we could make it a lot more balanced. And traditionally, captains of industries sought to do that. But with the global market that is out there now, you know, it used to be in the business owner's best interest to make sure that the families that work for them get enough income to feed themselves and house themselves and clothe themselves and take care of their health needs and take care of their education. But we know that that's not the case. All of these costs for families continue to rise while their incomes decline. I know what it is to struggle. You know, I come from a very modest background. My father and mother were a small farmer and a maid, and I worked in that environment, so I know what it is to struggle to make ends meet, to provide for your family. And when you're not paid enough, then you are denying your family that opportunity to fulfill, you know, their dreams in terms of the American dream.
Quickly, because we need to take a break.
Okay.
Just a quick answer to this. So, are you saying that capitalism is a bad thing?
I never said that. What I did say, I think it's the best system for allocating resources. But at the end of the day, the purpose of it is to create more capital. It's called capitalism. You know, it's the ism of capital, right? And that's how you create wealth. And Adam Smith talked about that. But he also warned against monopolies. You know, he warned against the fact that when you have these big companies that extract so much of the resources from the economy and charge higher prices and produce less, that is not a good thing. So he called for regulation of monopolies. He, the father of economics, the father of capitalism, Adam Smith, called for that. So we just have to come back into balance, and I think things have been a little bit helter-skelter.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I'll continue my conversation with Gloria Bromell Tinubu. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Gloria Bromell Tinubu is my guest this morning. Of course, she is the Democrat running for the 7th Congressional District. The Democrat running for the 7th Congressional District. Horry County is the biggest county in the new 7th District, largely Republican, and some huge Republican pockets in some other counties as well. What's the game plan for, let's face it, an underdog Democrat to come out on top in this November election?
I love you a lot, Tim, but I beg to differ.
Okay.
About that. As I said, I love being here with you. Based on the numbers that we've looked at, you know, of course, Horry County has trended historically Republican, but in the last several years, we've seen something very different. And and in fact, based on our performance in the entire district in both the runoff and the primary, we've demonstrated that we are very competitive. I received more votes collectively from all of the counties than Tom Rice received. So we can win this seat. We believe that all of the counties are important. And we are working our ground game and our outreach aggressively in Horry County as we are in all of the other 7 counties. We believe that our message of inclusion and diversity and making sure that everyone has access to the economic resources they need to realize their American dream has resonated with all people, Democrats, with Republicans, and people in the middle. So we've been very pleased with the reception that we've received, and we believe that we will win Horry County and win whatever numbers we need to win the election out of Horry County, because we've been really well received here as well as in the rest of the district.
I want to get to I-73, one of our bigger local issues. And I know that I-73 isn't something that you necessarily come out as a huge proponent for. You think that there's some alternatives that can be looked at. Do you still feel that way? And how do you feel about, you know, we talk about bringing infrastructure to the Grand Strand. Mm-hmm. A lot of people say I-73 is the type of infrastructure we need.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I would like to see happen in order for me to be in a position to fully decide where I land on this issue is to have an analysis, a benefit cost analysis done by an independent entity, a group that has no vested interest in the outcome, one way or the other. For me, that would satisfy my concerns with numbers that may emphasize something, or say we are going to create X numbers of jobs when those jobs may be less, and that really weighs all of the benefits and all of the costs associated with the undertaking. I recently received some information from a person in Horry County about transportation costs for the average citizen. And I just sort of read through it last night, but what struck me was that the typical person in this county and in this district really doesn't have access to a car to drive, even if they wanted I-73 and wanted to drive on it. The typical citizen in this district would not benefit from the construction of that interstate. In terms of the cost that it requires for someone to purchase a vehicle, maintain a vehicle, they said those costs would range from almost $600 a month and over $1,000 something a month in order to be able to access public transportation in terms of highways and bridges. What I would like to be able, highways rather, but what I would like for us to investigate very extensively is our investment in public transportation, mass transit, where we're looking at investing more in our system of buses, looking at the option of putting in some trolleys and light rail to transport people who are in the remote rural areas who don't have access to jobs that might be in the urban area, which would generate more benefit for people who are now still considered persistently poor, as they've been for the last 30, 40 years.
But isn't part of I-73 to attract businesses who could give those people better jobs to afford the cars?
Well, that's usually the narrative, right? That's usually the story, that it's going to attract businesses, that it's going to create jobs. And the question is, again, businesses for whom? Jobs for whom? Will these jobs be made available to the local people? Are they prepared educationally to even take advantage of these jobs? Are they in a position, do they own land, and do they have access to capital that they can start a business? And will the jobs that are generated simply be, again, low wage paying jobs? So we have to really be intentional about these proposed benefits, and if we want those benefits to actually accrue to the people that we want them to go to, then we have to make sure that whatever policies and resources that we allocate, that it's in writing, that we have it as a part of the program that we're implementing, that we're making sure that 35–40% of those jobs that are created benefit the people here locally. That 35, I'm just throwing out some numbers, that whatever percentage of the businesses that are generated, that we make sure that resources are allocated so local people can benefit from those resources. That way we know what we're doing. It's not just lip service to it, because we've seen millions and millions of dollars going in and out of particularly rural communities with the notion that they're supposed to benefit the people that are there, but we see the conditions of people not change one iota over 30 to 40 years. 7 out of the 8 counties are still considered persistently poor. We can do better, and we must do better.
We need to take a break because we don't have very much time left, and I've got a very important question I want to ask you when we come back.
All right.
Welcome back. Gloria Bromell Tinubu, Democrat running for the 7th Congressional District, is with me. And I believe that just like in the presidential race, where the 2 candidates are really not going after their bases, they're going out for those people that have not made up their minds and are on the fence about who they're going to vote for. I think you and Mr. Rice are kind of in the same position. The people that you really need to get are the people who haven't made up their minds yet who they're going to vote for.
Exactly.
I want you to tell people who could be leaning the other way, who could go either way on November 6th, why they should vote for you, and you got about 45 seconds to do it.
Well, let me talk real fast. I really believe that I bring the kind of experience as well as training that is absolutely needed in these times. I have 35 years of experience as an applied economist, and that means that I am trained to use the tools of the economic trade to solve real life problems. I understand how local economies work. I understand how rural and agricultural economies work. I have a master's in agricultural economics and the PhD in applied economics, both from Clemson. But I also have experience in the arena of public policy, having served in a General Assembly and on a city council and on a school board. I'm also an educator. I've taught at the high school and college level, and I was also a college president. I understand the role of education in people being able to move up that economic ladder. And finally, I know the relationship between education and employment as well as healthcare, because in order to be productive at work, productive in school, we need healthy people. So those are the legs of my platform. In addition to infrastructure, I believe that the people in the middle and the people on the edges all connect with that, and we believe that our message is one that is inclusive, and we believe that we will be victorious on November 6th with your help and with your vote. Thank you.
The next time I'm going to see you, I believe, will be October 17th when you debate.
Indeed.
We'll be carrying that debate here on WPDE.
Yes.
That's October 17th at 8 o'clock.
Yes.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank
Stay
you,
with
Tim.
us. We'll be right back.